Welcome to the Energy InSites podcast, your source for the latest insights in deep retrofits, renewable energy, and energy conservation. And now let's get to today's insights. My guest today has spent half a century proving that a home can make more energy than it uses, even through an Edmonton winter. He's a pioneer of net zero building and the deep retrofit movement in Canada, co-founder of Retrofit Canada, and the person behind North America's first energy sprong style retrofit. Peter Amerongen, welcome to Energy InSites.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you.
It is a true privilege to have somebody with your wisdom and experience coming on the pod today. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, You've been doing this since the 70s. So, long before it was fashionable. So I'm curious to get started with the past, present, and future. So what got you into this space?
Well, I was happily building log houses and deluded myself into thinking they were energy efficient until, and this was in the midst of the 1970s oil crisis, where we thought we were going to run out of fossil fuels and not be able to heat our houses and that. And Harold Orr, the engineer, Order of Canada engineer, Saskatchewan, farm raised, had done the Saskatchewan Conservation House, which was a response to that energy crisis, and showed that you could dramatically reduce the amount of energy that was needed in a house. And in the process, he'd also developed the first energy modeling software anywhere, along with Rob Dumont, one of his, who at the time was a grad student. Anyway, I went in from my beautiful log house that I was enjoying building for a lunchtime session at the U of A extension that Harold was giving. And when he started talking about where the energy was going and what you needed to do about it, it was like my St. Paul on the road to Damascus moment. I was knocked off my horse, went back to my beautiful log house and thought, crap, we can't do this anymore. And so went from that was the last one, to building timber frame houses that had the kind of airtightness and insulation values that Harold showed we needed. And so that was hard to sell. I did a few of them, but we ended up sort of pivoting to more conventional housing and got into the R2000 program. And at that point, we'd found a whole bunch more gas and oil, and so we dialed it back to basically the R2000 level. And did that, probably, we certified about 30 houses and continued to build a version of that until I heard about net zero, and after I built my own house. And so then I thought net zero was crazy. How can you do that in Alberta and Saskatchewan? And Rob Dumont showed me on the back of an envelope how his house, which had been written up as the best insulated house in the world in popular mechanics, could easily be net zero. So we thought, okay, we can do this, and we built one of the first net zero houses in Canada as part of the Equilibrium program in about 2007. And that was fine. I thought, great, let's save the world and build net zero. And that, and then it dawned on me that about 80% of the buildings we'll be using in 2050 are already built, and we need to figure out how to do that. So we had a good formula for building new net zero. We had to start to figure out how to retrofit. And the opportunity, and we had done retrofits in the past. We'd retrofitted 60 bungalows to basically R2000 in the 90s. And and always, whenever we did a major renovation to any building, we brought it a lot closer to. We would improve it. We'd add insulation if we were residing, all that kind of stuff. So it was not much of a stretch. And then I heard about the opportunity to for an Amerongen R&D project, and working with Mark Carver, who was doing the Pure project. He called me. I met him at a Passive House conference in Seattle, and he told me about this. Or he didn't tell me about this program. He told me about the Amerongen Pure project, panelized energy efficient retrofit, which was the beginning of bringing the Energy Sprong system to Canada. And I'd heard about that from some NAIT students who I was mentoring for Bachelor of Technology capstone project. And I had suggested to them the Sundance project because I knew Sundance would be interested. I didn't think anything would happen, but they brought they told me about Energy Sprong. So anyway, I was talking to Mark about all this stuff, and he called me a few months later saying there's this research call. So we pedaled like mad and got it, and that went to the co-op with the $2.5 million that was what we could potentially get. They were all in. They were. I didn't realize it until later, and looking at many other projects, that they were the perfect community. I had lived there, and it was just across the property line from my place, and they were on the verge of renewing their mortgage and their lease with the city for the land they're on down here in Riverdale. And they knew that if they were ever going to do anything to these buildings, now was the time, and that there was going to be no second chance. So they went all in, and were very. They had been pioneers in energy efficiency already, and general conservation. When their buildings were built in the 70s, and they started the first recycling program in the city shortly after they moved in. Cool. So this is part of their DNA, and they knew. So in that respect, like, they knew they were eventually going to have to do it, and all the way through the project, when we had options and decisions, they made the right choice because they knew they were only going to ever do it once, and it would be way cheaper to do it now. And so that taught us that lesson, which is really a fundamental part of and you know, I'm at the same time as we were doing the Sundance project, we heard about an opportunity with SSRIA here in Alberta to get some fundings to assist with trying out the system that we developed for Sundance for our panelized system, to try it on 3 single-family houses.
Oh, yeah.
We went for that, and we got it, and that and it worked fine. It was the subsidies from SSRA were generous. They made it possible to do it right and to do the whole thing for homeowners for whom it would have been a big stretch. And the other lesson that we learned from that project was that in every case, we ended up undoing work that these wonderful homeowners had done to make their houses more energy efficient, because they hadn't started with the end in mind. One instance, they had put solar panels on the house. It was a hard decision when we told them, sorry, Jim, we got to take those solar panels off because we have to build up over top of your roof. It's only a 2x4 roof, and we'll never get to net zero or get air tightness if we don't build over the top.
Right.
And so ultimately, he let us do that. there was more room to put the new solar panels back on, and that so it was all good. But still, and he had also re-roofed, so that was totally wasted because it was, which was a smart thing to do. When you're putting on solar panels, you better look down the road and see
Yeah.
put it over crappy shingles. So in another case, the homeowners had replaced their windows already with really crappy triple glazed sliders, and we looked at, could we just work around these? In hindsight, we probably could have, but because the subsidy was relatively generous, we did the right thing and we replaced them with high performance windows. But again, those windows had been subsidized. They'd gotten a rebate on them. They'd put their own hard-earned money into it, and we took it out. And the same thing happened in the third house, where they had added a whole bunch of insulation in the attic without doing anything about airtightness. We ended up sucking it all out, making the attic airtight, and putting it back in. And so what it taught us was, if you're going to retrofit, and it really doesn't, do an energy model, do a very careful assessment of the building, dial in the best version, the best 2050 version of that building, maybe 2060, maybe 2070, where the timeline is slipping. But dial in the best set of energy upgrades for that building, and then make a plan to get there, so that everything you do is done to that plan, and nothing that you do will make it any harder. And sometimes that means changing your sequence a bit, but
right.
It's the only thing that makes any sense. And so we take that to every retrofit project we go to.
Yeah, you've touched on three things there. So I'd love to kind of go a little bit deeper on each one, if I may.
Sure.
So starting with the first one with the roof. So they had redone their roof, asphalt shingles, put solar panels on. Now you say, hey, it's not thick enough. Do you rip off the shingles, go back down to the plywood, build it up from the outside, or did you go over the shingles?
We went over the shingles. We were able
Okay.
to, and this is on our Retrofit Canada website. It's a case study in our library.
Okay.
And there would be construction details. And since I've raised the subject of the library, it's a valuable resource. Like, we're getting as much information as we can about all of these, including drawings. It's all open source, all downloadable, and that will be part of the story on that case study.
Amazing. Well, if you send us the link to that library, I'll put it in the description of this video we upload it.
It's just retrofitcanada.com/case studies.
Fantastic. So that at least is a bit of a mitigating factor. So they had to take the panels off, but they still get whatever that little bit of R value from their existing shingles is, and then you're going right over it. You're not having to rip them completely off.
Well, it helped us a little bit during construction because we didn't have to worry so much about
rain and stuff,
rain and that kind of thing. But really, it was still, we could have done that just as easily with crappy old shingles as.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much more did you go? Did you put another 2x4 or a 2x6?
Because we were putting our poly vapor barrier over top of the old roof, we had to put at least twice as much insulation out as was there. But we didn't actually pay that much attention to that because we knew that, like, there was like R10 effective there we knew that the formula for an affordable net zero house means you're going to R60 anyway. So we got R60, R70, R80. It depends on the project. You need to dial it in there, but it's well over R50, unless there's some compelling reason not to do it. Because and that's again part of the optimizing process that you would do when you took a close look at the building and the energy model and said, okay, what are the measures that are available to us? What are we going to get from them? How's that look compared to net zero? And what are those measures going to cost on the basis of what's it going to, how many kilowatt hours a year are they going to save, and what's going to cost per kilowatt hour per year?
And if I'm visualizing it correctly, before it would have been just a typical attic space, like blown in insulation and not much on the roof joists.
Well,
And
no,
now you're
in this
really
case,
moving it to
in
the.
this case it was a semi bungalow, so the attic space was mostly developed,
Oh,
and
okay.
the ceiling was 2x4. Basically, the 2x4 rafters were all that was between you and the outside.
Okay. And they had insulation in there with
Totally.
a
What
very
we think,
small.
though, probably R8 rock wool. We never opened it up because
Okay.
we
It was
we
drywalled.
you know, they were living there the whole time. We wanted to minimize the cost and the amount of internal disruption. And since
Gotcha.
we were doing the whole thing from the outside, we didn't need to touch anything on the inside.
Got it.
We took out an old chimney, basically, and some HRV runs.
And then you started building up on top of the asphalt shingles with a vapor barrier, then more framing, and then more insulation inside of that.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the moisture concern.
We built a cavity for insulation, basically. And the other kind of anomalous thing about this particular project was it was built in 1953 or so, somewhere in the early 50s. And it's right on the edge of the historic neighborhood of Highlands in Edmonton. And the owners kind of wanted it to look like it had been built in the 20s. So we put this big veranda on it, and the roof solution and the veranda kind of worked together. In the design solution had to do both. So
cool.
Yeah.
So on to the second piece, the triple glaze sliders. So normally when people hear triple glaze, you think, wow, that's great. That's triple glazed. But you're suggesting there's a difference between sort of a low grade triple glaze and a high performance triple glaze.
Totally. Absolutely. And these were basically minimal triple glaze units in very flimsy, leaky sliders. So the window salesperson took advantage of what you just said to convince them to go that route. And I'm not even sure if I should know this, but I don't, whether the owners of the building at the time that we did the work were the same owners as put in the marginal triple glaze sliders.
Okay. So for the average homeowner who's looking at doing a renovation upgrade, maybe they're going to Home Depot, maybe they're getting some random contractor to pop into their house and give them a quote. What would you suggest for them to be able to spot that and not get caught in this kind of I'll say a white lie, like it's still a triple glaze, so they're not lying, is just maybe error by omission, or there's a subtlety there. What would you ask them to look for?
Our kind of retrofit 101 approach would avoid that situation, because you would have done an energy model and then you would have put the specs for those windows in there, and it would have shown you the benefit. And so you would have seen that it was probably smaller than you would have expected. But it's really worthwhile whenever you're doing this kind of major work, because these are big bucks, no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, the intervention, the labor to put in crappy windows is pretty much the same as the labor to put in really good windows.
Right.
So it's worth it to have an EnerGuide evaluation done. And if you're accessing subsidies, you probably have to have that done anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Then go a little further. and have the energy advisor dial in, the best whole deep retrofit possible.
And those guys are typically using Hot 2000, correct?
They would be.
Yeah. And that's got the goods that you need to be able to do
Well, it
a
is,
triple glaze
and
evaluation like that.
to like not every energy evaluator, they're all certified in using Hot 2000, but they're not all um, competent when it comes to dialing in retrofit measures. There's a lot
Got
of,
it.
but there is a group of super energy advisors that have been trained to do this, that are members of an entity called CASE, Canadian Association of Certified Energy Evaluators, and so they have a certification to that is probably pretty reliable.
Okay. And yeah, because I'm
And
thinking
you can find people who have taken that training on their website.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, we'll encourage people to check that out and get a Casey certified advisor to come and do their house, to make a distinction
And not
between
just CASE certified, but we want the CASE net zero people.
the net zero
I remember.
people.
I'm sorry, what their upgraded. I think they might be called a master EA or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, because they're looking for that nuance between regular triple glaze and the way that it was manufactured, or
And
the way that it was
the expensive
gas.
part of any window is the installation labor and the frame.
Mm-hmm.
The upgraded cost of the glass and is quite small in the scheme of things. And now, and this is really significant, I think, there are some window manufacturers who can give you quad pane glass that can have a center of, so your typical sealed unit, double glazed, has got an R value of 2. You add another pane to that, don't do anything else, you be R3. And if you start adding coatings, you might get that up to 6, 7, or 8. But these these quad pane thin glass windows have 4 panes and 3 cavities instead of 2, and the inner 2 cavities are made of iPhone glass, so it's very thin. It's like a millimeter thick, and so you're in a given glazing pocket, you can get a center of glass R value of around 13. And that's getting to be a game changer in some buildings with a lot of glass. And in some cases, in your drive to get to net zero, if you've already got, 2x6 walls, that might be enough to, with a few other things, to get you there with a heat pump. And so and I've done it in my house. I didn't have to. I could get to net zero with my geo system without it, but I couldn't resist. I got them from Ducks and Windows in Winnipeg. They had fiberglass. They're a fiberglass window manufacturer, high performance, very, very good windows. And I already had fiberglass windows that had been put in 1999, and some of the units were failing, but the frames were excellent. Fiberglass frames last forever. I have a fiberglass canoe that I bought in 1966 that we just took down the river the other day.
Nice. We have one as well. It's pretty heavy, but it's a good canoe. So between wood and fiber,
forever. Anyway, and all weather windows here is also able to do these quad pane thin glass windows as well. This is brand new, and it's and it just kind of reinforces the lesson in this retrofit 101 idea, that when you're looking at the building, you really need to consider many options. The same set of solutions is not going to be the best one for every building. And older buildings that have crappy walls, need new siding, all that kind of stuff anyway, are going to be more, the full outside retrofit approach will be more sensible. But buildings that have less heat loss, better starting points, interventions like quad pane windows might be the answer. They're not cheap, but it'd be a lot cheaper than the exterior envelope.
Fantastic. Yeah, we had James Barreton on a few weeks back, and he mentioned a company out of Edmonton called Light Zone that's also making those.
The same idea. These are they're very thick, and they can't go in a typical frame. These are getting that same performance with a much smaller glazing pocket.
Oh, okay. Amazing. So the last question there of the three was the attic insulation without air tightness. So when you're looking at that, are you doing, or whoever the evaluator is, just doing a standard blower door test to gauge air tightness, or they're doing something else within the attic space to see what's going on?
They're doing it with a standard. It's just a regular blower door. The typical blower door can't really, without extra work, and it's got to be cold, can't really break down where the leakage is very much. I mean, you can go around with a smoke pencil and sense it and get an idea, but you can pretty much be sure if you've got a 1960s bungalow, and it's got an air leakage of 5, 6, 4, 5, 6 in that range, that a whole bunch of it's in the attic.
Okay. Through the soffits, or through where the attic, or like kind of a hatch,
in the air barrier around the chimney, the plugs in the interior walls are connected to the ceiling, all kinds of little gaps in the vapor barrier. It's just not a tight vapor barrier. You're going to get, and you'd be foolish not to assume that it's very leaky.
So then, to remedy that, when you're doing a deep retrofit, are you going in, pulling out, like I'm picturing an attic that's not developed, that has all the, however many inches of cellulose or whatever. So are you going in there and actually pulling that back, or taking it out completely and then doing some kind of
a? In most cases, it's being sucked right out.
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's it's probably a mixture. It's probably some shavings and sticks, and with something from some subsidy program dumped over top of it.
And yeah, I've certainly been in a few
insulation installers are very reluctant, pretty much refuse to reuse it, because they're worried about those sticks getting in their blowing equipment and breaking impellers and stuff. So that stuff, unfortunately, goes to the dump. And it's even worse when somebody has gotten keen and put in a whole bunch more because they thought it was the right thing to do.
Right. And certainly there's a number of homes in Alberta that have vermiculite or asbestos insulation still as well.
Yeah, that for sure. You wouldn't want to reuse that, and it's pretty hard to separate it out. And we had that situation in one of the SSRA houses, and there again we just said, okay, we're just going to leave it, and we wrapped a vapor barrier over the top and put enough insulation in the new built up layer to be about double what was there already, so that we would keep that vapor barrier above the dew point.
Okay. And is there a general rule for how you do that, or do you have to model it out and get a height?
Basically 2 to 1, whatever you've got now in our climate. It's whatever you've got now, you better have double that.
Okay.
But it's also very important, when you're doing that kind of work, to make sure that the new vapor barrier you put up is very, very tight.
Okay. And you're accomplishing that in an attic space mainly through tape or and
No,
acoustic seal caulking?
we're doing like that. We're mostly doing that with spray foam,
Okay.
and not just any spray foam contractor. The spray foam contractors, that this needs to be tested after it's done to make sure that it's a good job, because
Okay.
they often can't tell. Even the fellows, the folks that we used for this and many others, like they insisted they wanted a blower door test right after they were done. They were up in the attic with smoke pencils and RI cameras, found the remaining leaks, sealed them, before they would say, okay, we're done.
Cool.
And
That's really great.
they
Yeah,
are
you don't
the-
hear that every day.
They are the absolute exception, because this stuff folds on itself. You can't really see it. It's difficult. It's not a panacea by any means. It has to be done well.
Yeah.
We had that experience in a house in Kingston that we worked in. We had to get them back 3 times, and I'm still not sure that we got a great job.
And you're doing it in some cases, if it's like a sensitive thing like an asbestos, you're putting a vapor barrier, you're doing it right over top of that.
No, we're doing that onto empty ceiling boards and up over the framing members and trying to, out to the edges.
As well. And in the case where there's a soffit, I've seen projects where they went over the soffits and now they don't have the airflow anymore.
Well, you have to maintain the airflow. Like you do have a compromised spot there. That's another thing that, they really should be putting in new baffles and spraying to those baffles, but from underneath. And
Right.
it's a crappy job. Like I get that, and you get in a bungalow, you've got situations that are really gnarly. You might have a hip roof where you've got a area where you can't get at stuff very well. It takes a bit of a saint.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had to do some work up in the attic, and it's not a place you want to hang out in too long. So let's go back to Sundance for a second, because that was a really novel project. I know you did some very interesting, innovative things that, in a way, you had the stars align for. And in terms of future projects for others, some of the key learnings that you took away from that.
Well, we kind of knew the basics when we went into it, but we had a really driven team with deep experience. And when I watched some of the other projects that are trying to get off the ground, like we were lean as all get out, and we didn't, we had the advantage of not knowing what we were getting into, and we chased after this grant that the co-op needed to help with the finances, and then when we got it, it was like the dog that caught the school bus. Now what do we do? So we kind of put together a team to do it, and that team had folks from Renew Engineering, one of the best mechanical and energy modeling companies in the country, I'd say, here in Edmonton, and on site we had some very experienced carpenters, and we had me who, I've been around the block and I've done everything. I started as a framer and have been working on energy details forever, and so we were able to kind of solve the problems as we encountered them. Like we did the project in 2 phases. We didn't know how it was going to go, what the costs were going to be. We started it by doing 1 duplex, and then looked at our costs after that, and then gave them a price to do the rest, and that helped a lot. I mean, we were still a little naive, but after the pilot, the first duplex, we came away with a list of 250 things that we had to do differently.
Wow.
And then we got to go from that building to the next, and the next after that. We had 15 buildings altogether. And so we were able, it was a lab for us. We were able to try out new things on one, like get ideas while we're doing one building to try out on the next.
Yeah.
And by the end of the job, we were going about 2.5 times as fast.
And
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And the bank was quite supportive along the way.
No. No, it was a co-op, basically. I mean, we were on a fixed price contract, and I mean, the bank looked at the energy modeling and the cost projection, that sort of thing, but it really wasn't very much involved. It was a credit union, and it was mostly, and this was another star that aligned, a woman named Lynn Hanley, who had started almost all of the co-ops, housing co-ops in Alberta, and was very experienced at finding money, managing consultants and contractors, and was completely bought into it. She was also a member of Sundance, but that made a huge difference as well.
Amazing. How much of a difference do you think that working with a co-op versus a strata made? Like a typical condo corp.
You know, I mentioned the pioneering nature of these folks and their far-sighted view. I think they're rare in any among any owners, really. So, and we've worked with other co-ops, and they have that tendency, but they're strapped. I mean, they're trying to provide affordable housing. They basically need to work on what the members can afford to pay. And they do have the advantages of being able to aggregate this stuff. And there is I don't know, there seems to be kind of a synthesis in the ownership model and the kind of people and value systems in co-ops. There are other co-op projects across the country that are getting close to getting there.
Yeah, I had a lot of experience with co-ops over the years, and certainly have found maybe a more proactive, cohesive ownership group, like-minded folks than you might get in your typical condo corp, where people tend to turn over more and there's less collaboration, and there's more differing opinions and stuff.
And it's scary. It's it's a new thing. No one has ever tried to really do this at scale before, other than the sort of minimal maintenance that's encountered.
Yeah, so many homeowners are just keeping their place going until something breaks, and then they fix that, until something breaks, and then they fix that. And so when we talk about how we have this massive housing stock of aging homes, what would you say to the average homeowner who's sitting there debating tearing it down and starting over, or selling their house and downsizing and letting the next guy deal with it, versus ways to start and how they could maybe work with what they've got?
It's always going to be cheaper to fix these houses than it is to replace them, by a long shot. So it's cheaper to do the retrofit than it is to tear it down and build a new house. And also carbon wise, I mean, we can't afford to replace all those foundations. We'll be emitting so much in terms of the embodied carbon of the concrete and many of the other projects that will be in the hole, basically. If your motivation is to save GHGs, you will fail.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've had people. Now they were generally a fan of retrofits, but they've suggested that in certain instances, with certain vintages and houses of a certain condition, um, they felt that over, if you were to look at it over a 20-year horizon or something like that, now getting that significantly more efficient material could ultimately turn the tide in making
Yeah, and
the
it's
tear down
probably
rebuild
more
model sound
money
better.
before you catch up on the embodied carbon. But there are other things too. It's like every project needs its own analysis. But we're
Mm-hmm.
working with a nonprofit in Winnipeg where these are 1919 or 1910 houses that have that are going to cost a fortune to fix, and the zoning would allow, and they're a nonprofit. Their their deliverable is housing for people, and by tearing some of those houses that are going to be the worst ones down, they can serve more people with better housing. So
Mm.
that's part of the equation as well.
Yeah, that thank you. That's a good point. One of the nuances to that conversation I had was around, an older, leaky single family home that's maybe your Victorian style with the big porch and whatever,
Yeah.
versus the new infill laws that would have that being replaced with a fourplex and a laneway house or something like that,
Yeah.
and that starts to become better for that gentle density.
And for sure, and by putting those people in that inner city location rather than forcing them out to the suburbs, um, we might be uh, saving a whole bunch of transportation energy as well.
Yeah, piggybacking on transit and
Yeah, yeah.
walking and right. Very good. Um, so and we've touched on this a little bit here, but just let's back up a step here because I'd like to get your perspective on a deep energy retrofit and how you consider that different from a normal renovation. And people have described it as wrapping a house in a warm sweater. Are you a fan of that sort of definition, or are you more apt to work on the outside of the house or the inside of the house or both?
It depends. It depends on the starting point of that house, and how long it's likely to last. What can it be made to last another 50, 100 years by doing this work? Really, it every house needs that that individual analysis where you look at what you find and then come up with the best solution for that building. And I think we're still learning from the buildings. We don't. There's never going to be um, a one size fits all, but we're just getting started on this. And I can't walk into a building without learning something new about some new problem that we need to learn how to figure out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's something else that Retrofit Canada is 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 doing. We're starting to realize that our case study library, while it will collect examples of many, many different uh, retrofits and retrofit solutions, that we can't count on people reading them. It's a lot of work. And so we're looking for resources to be able to mine that library and develop a solutions guide where we curate the best solutions and tie them to the conditions that were found that made them the right solution for that job.
Mm. Almost an executive summary version of some of them.
Well, yeah, we're still working on it. We got a long ways to go. It is so complicated.
Well, one of the reasons that we decided to start this podcast is just along those same lines. We know there's lots of research out there, there's lots of reading material, but not everybody is super technical. Reading will put you to
Totally.
sleep. Everybody's into sort of audio and video now. and conversation. And, we work a lot with First Nations communities, and the oral tradition is something that's gone on for thousands and thousands of years. And so talking to one another and sharing our stories and experience and being able to provide some context and nuance that when you write it down in a case study format or whatever, and it's no knock on case studies, they're great.
No.
But you don't necessarily get those kind of dancing around into different categories that can give somebody a really nice context for why they want to make a certain decision.
And it might even be misleading. Somebody might look at a cool retrofit, see the beautiful after pictures, the good story, and the cool things that were done, and just say, okay, that's what I want to do. But it might not be the right solution for their house.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the way things have evolved over time, we started this call talking about timber frame log cabins and how you were quite enamored with that. And I think a lot of people still are in a very nostalgic, traditional way. But now we're in the middle of and last year we thought was the worst. And before that, we thought it was the worst wildfire season we've ever seen in this country. Tens of thousands of people being evacuated. At the same time, just a few weeks ago, one of our First Nations communities, everybody was dealing with flood waters in Manitoba. So we got floods and fires happening at basically the same time. How has that changed the kind of materials that you espouse now? When you talk about the roof, when you talk about siding, when you talk about windows and foundations, what are you suggesting now to kind of consider that?
Well, that's a whole nother complication that needs to be part of the analysis. Is like, if we're going to put all this money into this house, it better be resilient. And the resilience solution, the best resilient solutions are going to depend on the risk. And there's some work going on in that area. Amerongen is doing a great job of starting to collect resilience recommendations for different flood or different climate risks: fire, flood, intense rain, hail. Calgary get big hail problems. I'm trying to think of the other, overland flooding. What are the other risks?
Well, air quality in relation to that stuff.
Air quality is a little bit easier because if you made your house airtight, you put in a HRV with good filtration, and you feel about the best you can do. But it's definitely part of the solution is to do everything at once. It's going to be way cheaper.
Yeah, and certainly we've seen more interest in, and I know the embodied carbon piece is sort of have to offset with this, but cementitious stucco, metal, moving away from vinyl, moving away from asphalt shingles, the kind of stuff that can spontaneously ignite, even wood. But if you're in a very wet climate, not as big a deal.
Your risk for sure, you should be using hardy siding and metal roofing, and there's some shingles that are fire resistant. I can't remember the formulation, but yeah,
a few different brands. And even from a hail perspective, now it's not just good enough to be a metal roof. It's got to be a certain gauge to allow to handle the biggest of the hail, because they're getting bigger.
Totally. And so,
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Peter, this has been a masterclass in what's possible. Before we go, for all the builders, homeowners, community leaders out there that might be interested in learning more or following you or getting in touch with you, where should they look, and how do you like to get reached?
Probably my Retrofit Canada email would be the best.
Okay. Do you share that here, or do you want me to put it in the
info at Retrofit Canada tag on our site as well? That because I might not be necessarily the right person. But
yeah, and typically these days you're helping homeowners with building their.
I'm helping a small contractor, a couple of guys who used to work for me, come up with retrofit solutions and fine tune different ways of building out walls and roofs and getting air tightness and that kind of thing without breaking the bank. I do some work with Retrofit Canada, and I do a little with Renew Engineering as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Peter, so much.
Well,
This has
thanks
been
for
very informative, and I'd love to have you back in a couple of months and we could do a follow-up.
Sure.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. Enjoy the day.
All the best.
Take care.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.